Yo, what's good, gang? It's your boy Westend here, and I'm excited to be back on YouTube doing a track from scratch. And I'm gonna be making this track using only samples from the brand new sample pack we just released at Kick and Bass called Electro. It's what's hot right now. It's what all the kids are making these days, and we made a sample pack for that kind of electro, gritty, throwback tech house sound that's you're hearing everywhere. So I highly recommend copying this pack. We got over 150 CRM presets, 1,000 plus samples. You can go to the bio, the description below to grab it. So this is just showing you the capabilities of quickly using only sounds from this pack, getting something that sounds pretty decent right off the bat. And yeah, let's give it a listen through, and then I'll leave you guys on your way. And without further ado, let's get into this. So we got a fully blank template, and a lot of people were asking in my last video that I did, how do I get the template? We give it away in our Kick and Bass community. This is our Discord, which you can also sign up for below. Go do that. And yeah, we have a blank template, so let's get started. So I'm gonna open up the pack, and we're gonna start getting a nice drum beat going, because for tech house, drums and then bass obviously is extremely important. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to get all the other ingredients in there. So let's start looking at some drum sounds. Let's get a kick going first. And the nice thing about this pack, we got dirty kicks and punchy kicks. Get my volume up a bit. Want to get something kind of short, snappy, and punchy. So in my template, we got the kick group. We'll add this to the low. That's nice. If you always want to check what key the kick is in, you can have like a tuner on. Sometimes it's not super accurate. What I like to do is use span on high res mode and kind of hold it at the peak. See where that peak is. So F, perfect. I love writing music in the key of F, so that'll work. And normally, if this was not a quick track from scratch video, I would spend some more time really building the top end of this kick, layering it up. But we are on a time constraint here, so you got to pick your losses. I think it's really important to make music sometimes with time constraints, because it forces you not to overthink things, and it forces you just to be creative and focus on raw ideas. So let's set a tempo here. Let's go 128. Can't go wrong with that. And let's start building out some drums to go around this kick. So it's always nice to get a loop, but I'm going to save the loop for later. We're going to start with a closed hi-hat sound. I like this one. It's kind of got like a acoustic feel to it. And we're going to do, for this electro sound, it's nice to have eighth notes that kind of follow the kick and the offbeat here. So something simple like this. It's going to sound a little boring at first, but we can spice this up. Oh, I think I messed this up. This kick goes, this one goes here. There we go. Sorry. A little slow. There you go. All right, so something like that. and get that going over the whole thing. And then we can add a bit of swing to this as well. So I'm gonna just consolidate a nice, EQ this, maybe take out a little bit of the lows. And then, we're gonna add some groove here. So click on the clip, go to the groove section. And this is really an eighth note. I like these swing logic eighths, and we want something pretty subtle. So some of these higher numbers are gonna not have as much swing as that, right? You can really hear the groove there. Something like this. And I like to apply my swing, so it's already applied, but I like it to actually move the warp markers on the grid. So what you're gonna do is click this little button right here, and you can see now if I zoom in, this was right there before, it's moved off a little bit. Cool, so we got a little bit of swing on these hats. Now let's add a clap. And for this electro tech house kind of sound, I find that using like a standard 909 clap doesn't really fit the vibe. It's better to use like a snare clap or a pre-shifted clap. So we've included a couple of those in this pack. So let's go to start with a single clap. Kind of like that. I'm going to cut the tail off that because I don't like the tail, but we're going to clap. You see there's like this like reverb tail. We're going to remove all that. And this is a 909 bass, but what we're going to do is we're going to add like a snare and a shifted clap to make it better. Cool. And then let's add another layer. So this is going to be the pre-shifted one. Kind of like the reverse here, and I really don't think we need all this junk kinda. So I'm actually gonna Command E, split that, and then I'm gonna just like bring down the volume of the sample. So it's a lot quieter, fade it even more. So it's got that nice little tail. You can maybe even bring the volume of this down a little bit on the clip editor. And then let's get a snare going. So a lot of these snares, we got the electro snares. That's what we want to use. So it's kind of got the snap I want. And you may be wondering why I'm doing all this boring stuff now. Well, I want to make sure that my drums sound really good before I start adding my bass and before I start adding vocals and synths. Because if it's kind of sounds like crap, it's hard for me to tell whether the thing I'm adding on the bass or synth front sounds like crap, or if it's just because I have a bad beat. I think of it like a hamburger, right? Any good hamburger, you're gonna need a really good bun, and you're gonna really need a really good patty. And then whatever differentiates the other parts of the hamburger, whether it's a cheddar jalapeno burger, whatever it is, that's all the fluff stuff. That's the synths, the vocals. But for tech house, you really need the good drums and bass. So we're constructing the patty right now. We're making sure it's using high quality beef, and that's what we got to do at this moment. Bring the volume down of that. It's kind of nice. Maybe a little bit more tail. We can EQ this a bit. A lot of low end. We could probably take some of this out from that snare. Then we could go to this clap right here. This is the bus, and we could maybe boost the highs a bit and add a little bit of reverb here. So I'm gonna add Valhalla Room, bring down that dry wet. Just want a little bit of a nice reverb tail there. So let's take this, copy this out. Cool. All right, now let's get some loops going in here just to fill out the drums, right? This is just the basics, the most basic drums. But if I just did this, then I feel like my track would be a bit too basic. So let's go to some drum loops, top loops. Okay, so this one, I like the pattern here, and I'm gonna go to my loop section under top, throw that in, and it's gonna sound a little busy right now. So what we're gonna do is actually go to the clip editor, go to beats mode, change this arrow to the right, and start bringing this number down. That's gonna shorten the sustain of each of the drum sounds in the loop. It doesn't sound that great. Let's find a different loop. Something like this is probably gonna help. And the reason why it sounds a little off is because we didn't add the swing to this. So let's add that swing. And then let's see what we got. Some other loops here. Maybe a percussion loop or a ride loop. We'll use those later. Could try always. You know, I'm always of the idea that add more, and then if it starts sounding bad, you can start taking away some stuff. So again, let's make sure we add the groove that we applied before, the swing. Cool. All right, so we got a bit of a drums going. We can develop these more later, but this allows us to start playing with some bass sounds. So I'm going to go to a bass loop just because it's going to be a lot easier to get an idea going. But you could recreate any of these bass sounds using the presets that we provide in the sample pack, which we will get to when we start doing some more fun synth stuff a little bit later. So we got a few different categories here under the bass samples. We got under bass loops, we got 808 bass loops, acid, offbeat, pluck, and rolling bass. I'm a fan of the offbeat bass. I just find that it has the right kind of vibe for me. So let's start listening to some of these. It's a little slower. So I'm not really worried about the key of any of these because I can always pitch them up or down. I'm just kind of going for a pattern I like. I'm going to try out both of these and see which one kind of fits the vibe better. So we also have all these with sidechain applied to them. So if you didn't want to add your own sidechain, you could just use one of the sidechain loops, but I'm going to do my own sidechain. So let's start with this one. And let's try this one as well. This one is have to. All right, I definitely like the first one more. I feel like it fills out the track better. So let's start playing with that, and we're gonna turn on Kickstart 2, or it's already on a little bit. Okay, cool. So now that I got a bass loop in, I can start to feel this track coming together, and I'm gonna start maybe playing with these hi-hats a little bit. Yeah, we don't need the 16th note hat at the moment. Cool. All right, let's start getting some other elements going. So we kind of got the patty and we got the bun. And now we can start looking for the lettuce, the tomato, the sauce, you know, all that kind of fun stuff. So let's go to vocals. And in this sample pack, we got the chopped vocals, which I love. If you listen to my track Rhythm Machine, it's got a robot vocal and a chopped vocal. And then we have the phrases, which are going to be your more classic hooks. So I actually want to start with the chopped vocal because what I'm going to do in this track is I'm going to have both playing, not simultaneously, but both existing at the track. In one track. So you can also play the loop while we hear this. That one's kind of cool. I like 14. Okay, cool. So a little bit about my creative process. I wanted to listen to all the loops, and a lot of it's just like initial vibe, like what I think feels cool to me, and that's just based on the music I like. And I try not to overthink it too much. And this one I think was my favorite. So let's throw that in and just see how it sounds with everything. So I have like a background vocals section. Just put it in here. So it's a little bit like too busy, so I kind of want to see. I love this part. So maybe we can have this. Maybe like copy it a little bit more. That's pretty nice. So let's copy that over. Since we're kind of in a drop section, what I'm gonna do is add some sidechain to this. So we're gonna add kickstart 2. I feel like we can add a little bit more delay here. So I'm just processing the sound just to getting it sounding a little bit more how I would want to in the final version of this track. Cool, so let's go to some synth work now, because we could add another vocal, but we may actually only need this vocal depending on how crazy we want to go with the synths. So this time we're gonna load up Serum 2, which is my first time doing this in a tutorial. If you don't have Serum 2, I highly recommend getting it. It's free upgrade. It's a free upgrade if you already own Serum 1, but it's dope. So let's get Serum 2 loaded in there. Beautiful. Oh, Serum 2. And let's add some of these presets. So Electro Tech. And we got tons of presets here. Let's start with some lead stuff. Some stabs, maybe. Kind of cool. It's like that Notion sound. Kind of like that. So stabs, I always like to put something on the 1 because it, think about right after build up, kind of want like a big synth sound to hit you right there. So you can put anything on the 1. It doesn't have to be a stab, but I like having something there. And we're working in the key of F, so there we go. We can fine tune this later, but I'm just testing out a few ideas. And I like to get a lot of like synth ideas down very quickly because I don't want to focus and get too locked in on something. I'm really waiting for something to totally catch my vibe. So usually what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this Serum thing since I already have the patch loaded up, and I'll start just going through some other sounds. It's kind of cool actually. What if I went up an octave here? That's kind of giving me some old like Crookers type vibe, 2008. What if we like started pitching this down a bit? And this is where your creative juices should be flowing, right? You're listening to the synth, you're coming up with ideas of things to try, you're trial and erroring. This is like the fun part of making music. So I may get locked in for a second. Let's see. Serum. We're gonna do. We should be able to just do it here with the pitch bend. Close that in. That's kind of cool. I think with a little bit more movement on this sound, let's It's got that really nice kind of detuned sawtooth feel to it. We're gonna add a little bit of EQ. We definitely don't need that sub because we have our bass. Let's add a bit of reverb here like we did before. Let's add sidechain. Sounds like a fart. All right, the sound needs a little bit more release at the end, so I'm gonna turn up the release on these envelopes. The release is too long now, so we gotta fix that. Sometimes when you're playing with presets, it takes you a little bit to figure out exactly what's going on, right? All right, we can dial that in later, but I think I like that a lot more. Cool. So let's keep that kind of going, and let's try to play with some of the loops in here because the synth loops are awesome. So I'm gonna open up this and go to the lead synth loops. Start listening to some. That one's pretty cool, and this one was also cool. So this is in D, so to get it to F, we would have to go D sharp, E, F. So up 3 semitones. All right, that's okay. Let's hear what else we got here. That one's cool. It kind of fits the groove of the bass a little bit more. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. Let's add a little bit of sidechain here. And these aren't, this synth, this crazy one right here, and this are kind of fighting. Especially with that release on it. I may just reload this patch because I think I kind of messed it up a little bit. Okay, that actually does kind of work. There's a cool little mix trick I'll show you guys. So if you use a plugin, it's called Track Spacer. It's kind of like we call it like a dynamic sidechain. So it'll duct out only the frequencies that are being played by another sound. So in this case, we're gonna open up this tab. We're gonna set the sidechain input to loop 1 because that is where that sound is coming from. Actually, we're going to do it the other way around. Sorry. So we're going to put this track spacer on loop 1, and we're going to set this to serum. Should be here. The first or second one. Second one. And now, when we listen to this sound, you can hear that the sound only comes in after the original, big synth is playing. So that's why we put the track spacer on this, because every time the synth plays, it's going to cut out those frequencies from this sound so they don't clash. And if I bring this dry wet down, you'll hear both at the same time. All right, cool. So I'm going to pretend like this is like the first part of my drop, And let's get into actually arranging this a little bit. So let's say these first 8 bars are the first part of the drop. What do I want to do in the second 8 bars to kind of keep the energy going? So the first thing I'm going to think of is let's get some more drum sounds in there, and especially like an open hi-hat. I keep hearing that. So let's go back here, drums. We're not going to use loops, we're going to use one shots. And let's go to cymbals. Not closed, open. That one's kind of nice. I may shorten it up a little bit, but just gonna go here. Maybe something actually a little brighter. Yeah, that's actually really nice. That's bloody lovely. All right, copy that over. Don't think about this too much. Cool. So because we're using a loop here, I always like to think of ways that I can make this loop a little bit more interesting. And it's a bit hard because it's not like a synthesizer where I can go in and like play with the filter cutoff or change all these parameters. This is already printed to audio. So what I'm going to do is use a really cool plugin called Infiltrator. Did I spell that right? Infiltrator. Yes. I just got it, so I don't know all the awesome presets yet. But it's a really cool like multi-effect tool. And especially when you're using loops from a sample pack, synth loops, you can create some cool versions of it. So let's say this is like the main loop. I'm just going to go through some stuff and until I find something I like. Beat mashing, beat repeat. That one's kind of cool. So we'll keep that on, and then we can play with this dry wet. So we'll just keep it normal, and then maybe every 4 bars we kind of pump up that dry wet. Maybe this way, we'll do it like this. Subtle little things just to keep it interesting and not so repetitive. And we could duplicate this infiltrator again and you know, find another preset. But for the sake of time, we'll just stick to this for now. Let's also go back to the sample pack because I know there's some really cool synth fills, which I don't often see in a lot of packs, and that could be really helpful as well. So let's go back here, synth fill loops. That sounds dope. So let's throw this in. Throw this in here. And maybe on this sound, you know, since we're going to have a new synth come in, it's probably good to filter out a little bit of this sound so they don't clash as much. So I'll use a high pass filter and I'll just kind of bring this up to 1,000 something or so. 2,000. So, right. So this will leave a little bit of space for this. And this was in the key of E. So this has just got to go up 1 semitone. Kind of like doing something like that. We could almost take out this big synth for the first 2 times, so this is more of an arrangement trick. And then during this section, when that new synth comes in, I want to take out all of the low end here. So I'm going to use this Pro Q3. I'm going to turn this to a low cut, change this to like 36. Find a nice sweet spot. So that's too much, too much, too much, too much. Something like that sounds kind of good. We'll just turn this EQ on. just for this little section. Probably do it all over here as well. This is a chord right now. I can see by the semitones being pitched up for. I want to see what it sounds like not as a chord. That's pretty cool. Maybe like add some movement to the sound. So let's like play with this filter frequency. You know, a little bit of movement there. All right, cool. So we got a nice little 16 bar loop. We could probably develop this for another 8 bars. And so you got to ask ourselves, what do we want to do for the next 8 bars? Maybe play with the synth a bit so it's not as repetitive. So we could either have this infiltrator maybe like rising the whole 8 bar section. I almost think maybe leaving this synth out until the end so it's not so repetitive and having that be like the new sound. And then for the drums, I like the idea of maybe adding like a ride hat somewhere. So there was some ride loops if I remember correctly. Cymbals, loops, ride loops. It's like classic 909 stuff. And then we also got some drum fills, right? Yep, right here. Clap fills. So a clap fill will sound great like at the end of every 8 bars. You know, if I really wanted to spice it up, I could add a little bit of delay to this last clap sound. These little details help to transition the sections of your song so it feels a little bit more smooth when it's going from one section to another. So like we could add like a ping pong delay, bring this down a bit, and then we could just only turn on this delay during this last clap. So you're going to hear what it sounds like. I don't know if you picked that up. So it adds a nice little ping pong kind of effect at the end. We could just have that going each time, and then maybe at the end, what I like to do is we got these snare fills as well. Snare rolls, excuse me. Something like that, so that we know that it's going to be the end of drop 1 when you hear this big snare roll kind of come in. And we can add our own filter here, right? Auto filter. Whoa, 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 whoa. I think the BPM is 128, but it thought it was way slower than that. It sounds a lot better. Kind of like that, like here. All right, so, you know, a few other details I want to kind of add here. Let's see how we are on time. Okay, cool, perfect. So when I'm listening to this beat, I'm hearing da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-ba. So I want something else to emphasize that ba-ba that's not the synth. Ba-ba. All right, so maybe that'll be another synth sound. Maybe it'll be, you know, let's go back to Serum, and I think I'll use, I'll use Serum 2 again. So Serum 1 presets, Electro Tech. Maybe let's use like an acid sound. Or bass sound. Whoa. Where is this? Oh, Serum 2. Let's put this here. It's a little bit loud. That one's a little bit more like chill. So it's like right there is the area. So that's where I'm gonna draw my MIDI clip, and then now, you know I like this preset, which is mellow, but I could try a few other ones. That one's kind of sick. I like that, and I still want to have a stab in the beginning, but just something a bit more subtle. So this is very messy right now, this project. I apologize, but when we're working fast, we're not concerned about making everything look pretty. So this is going to be a MIDI clip right here. It's just going to be one note like that, and then make sure we're on the right zero patch. That one's kind of cool. I kind of like that. Let's listen. All right, sorry, I'm a little slow right now. Oh my God, let me copy you, please. Okay, and then maybe copy this like this. I can hear this, because this is a bass preset, obviously there's a lot of sub information, and we don't need that fighting with the kick, so let's take that out. If we want, we could add even a little bit of, like, I got this Westend vocals rack, which you can also get in kick and bass, and I'm gonna add that right now, just to beef up the sound a bit. Problem is there's a little bit of reverb in the sound. It's kind of pissing me off, but again, like I said, it's not the biggest deal at the moment, but if I really had the time, I would try to make sure the sound is super clean. All right, cool. We got a drop. This is definitely like a first drop. Let's see if we can add another vocal to, I took this out for now, this background vocal. But here, let's start doing the build up, and then I'll show you how we can add a vocal in. So for build up, what I like to do is take like your most basic drum loop. So it's like this section before we add all the other fluffy stuff in. And I like to take the kick and the bass as well. And I want to take out all the low end from the kick and the bass. So we're going to turn this EQ on the whole time. Then I want to take this loop that we made, this vocal loop, add that in here. So like this is cool. Like this is naturally where like the end of the build up starts happening. So we could even loop this part so it doesn't do like the whole thing. Starting to hear in my head what could be coming, right? So let's work with what we already have. Let's say we take out this section right here. This is where the vocal is going to be. All right, so it's hitting, right? Let's take out the kick and bass there. Turn that back off. Cool. So, easiest things to do would be to turn on like this endless smile that I have in the template. Start to bring in some reverb and tail end and energy, right? So let's just do that. Same thing here with the background vocal. We're looping it, so we want to have some way of creating movement across that loop. And one plugin I really like for that is called Transit. Sorry, not Transmit. And it's kind of like Endless Smile, but it's got way more presets and a little bit more functionality here. So we could just pick like a transition. I just like to do this. Close my eyes. Boom. What's that? No, drums is probably not right. But... And then... Didn't love that. That one's kind of interesting. I'm just looking for something with a nice like dry wet that I can automate. Come on, give me dry wet. That's cool. Okay, cool. So we'll kind of automate this dry wet to go up a bit, create that like buzzy, reverby movement sound. You know, if we want to make this like even more interesting, what we could do is throw on a spectral resonator. Gonna make it sound like robotic-y. Change this to notes mode, go down to F. Pretty cool. Let's add a filter just because some of those effects are introducing like some sub bass, which I don't really want. It's gonna sound weird in the club on the speakers. So we'll kind of all right, cool. Something like that. Obviously maybe a snare roll would really help here. So let's go back to Electro Tech. I don't really care about the pattern. I'm just listening for a snare sound. This one's actually kind of cool. I don't know why these don't get analyzed right, but that's Ableton's fault. You could maybe have this come in here. I actually don't love the pitching on that. Let's do something like this. Alright, something simple. I think we already used this one, but it'll be fine. Just throw that around, throw on a filter, low pass. Cool, and we have some of these lead synth sounds that we're using, so let's start to like introduce them a bit in the build-up, right? You know, and if we wanted to make it like more spacey here, we could add a Echo Boy or any delay. It doesn't really matter. Maybe change this style to something random. Maybe put this EQ at the end. Same thing with this sound. I think there's a little bit too much like high end going on, so I'm kind of mixing as I go. But we can add like a filter. All right, cool. So we got a little gap here. This would be great for another vocal. Maybe start teasing it in. Maybe put the synth here. I don't even think we need the synth right now, but we can maybe use it for later. So it's never a waste to have it in. But yeah, let's add a vocal. Other thing I want you to notice is that we just did that whole build section, that break build. We didn't use one effect sample, right? We're really focusing on the meat of what we have and using automation and creating movement there. Once we're done with that, then we can open up our little effects area and start adding in some white noise. So there's some really great noise risers in this sample pack. You know, something like this maybe. Just make sure this is timed right. 128. Seeing if there's one that's a little bit chiller. Yeah, that one's a little bit easier to work with. You know, we got some other cool miscellaneous FX shot. Maybe that could be used like halfway through this build up to before the snare roll comes in, like right here. You can see that being like a little reverse sound. Hearing a little bit of a clap, like right here. You can kind of hear it in this top loop. So you probably want to take out that clap sound there. Replace that with that, and then copy this. Little subtle details, right? You know, if I'm taking out the clap here, the main clap, if I can still hear a little bit of a clap in a top loop, it's not super beneficial. It's just kind of, it defeats the purpose of taking it out because I don't want the beat on the 2 there. I want it just to focus on that kick hi-hat. All right, so now we got some room for a vocal right here. So we'll go to our main vocal.
Feel the bass inside your body. Get into the groove. Keep on moving on the ground. Lost in the rhythm. Deeper than deep, higher than high.
That's kind of cool. A deeper than deep one.
Deeper than deep.
Just take the first part of it. Deep, but then deep. You could even like glitch out like the last part maybe. Bring this a lot quieter though.
Then deep, deep, deep. Deeper than deep. Deeper than deep.
I think add a nice little clap right here.
Deeper than deep.
I can kind of hear that the hats are a little bit out of sync. I think that's from me swinging the first loop and it's not swinging it correctly in the second one. Again, this is something that, you know, I can notice and write down and get to later, but I'm not like gonna spend, 5 minutes right now doing that. And I think it's important as a producer to know when to tackle certain things and when not to. Obviously, if you're trying to write an idea really quickly, or if you're like in a collab session with someone, then these are little things that maybe you just write down and deal with later. But yeah, this is coming together pretty nice. So let's kind of listen, and then I'll tell you guys what I'm thinking of things that I think could be added or improved on. All right, cool. We have a really good hamburger, which is the analogy for today's videos. So we have a nice artisan cheeseburger, and now we're just really fine-tuning, adding little details. So one thing that I noticed was I wanted to add a little bit of a down sweep at the beginning of the break, just to give it a little bit more release before it starts building up. You know, the other thing we could do is add a little bit of endless smile, that reverb effect sound, onto the kick and bass group. That's going to help make the kick not so like punchy throughout the whole build-up. So we can kind of have it start to... All right, cool. Let's make sure that that reverb is not on during the drop. And then the next thing I would do is I would work on this call and response between the synths. So it sounds like this right now. So we actually set up this sound because it matched this sound, but it sounded a little bit too crowded there. So let's see if we can actually maybe bring this back, but not as a whole loop. So something like this. I did like that infiltrator effect we had. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, that's a lot easier to work with. It creates a lot more space in the track. So let's copy that. There's still some more stuff we could do. We could open up another serum here. We're kind of running out of time. So this is where I would start to put in my effort next if I was going to continue working on this track. We could load up serum 2. Go back to Electro tech. Maybe go to like a polysynth or something. Let's see what's in here. Skip the pads. It's kind of cool. Yeah, something like this. Boom. Sound needs a little bit more reverb on it, but something like just the F note, and then maybe goes up a semitone. Shorten this a bit. Bum 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 bum. Try this with some other sounds. Let's try it with like a lead short. This one's kind of cool. Take out the low end from that, and I think we got a nice fitting sound. This is cool. I think this open hat, we could probably shorten it a bit, right? You can see how long the tail is, especially since we're going to be bringing in a ride hat afterwards. I like the idea of shortening this so it's a little bit tighter. Can have the second one be a little bit longer. I like this effect. Consolidate those two so it's easy to copy and paste them over like this. Keep copy and pasting that. And then the other thing is, now that we have a vocal that we use, it would be nice to use this vocal in the drop as well. And then maybe, you know, the first time we use it just like we did it in before the drop, the second time we use it, we can like stretch it out. So we'll just like double this, triple it, whatever it is, and go here to texture mode and then change this flux right here. I don't know what exactly is going on, but it sounds sick. Yeah, that sounds dope. All right, cool. We're kind of coming close on the hour here. So this is a great way to get an idea down, something that you could listen back to later and be like, I love this idea, I want to keep working on it, or I hate it, I don't love anything about it. You didn't spend a whole day. You know, you can knock out 3 of these in a few hours, and then you have 3 ideas that you can compare and see how you want to develop. And you have to remember when someone like me is making a track for a YouTube tutorial, it's not going to sound exactly like my productions because I don't have any time constraints on my productions. I'm able to listen to reference tracks and really dial in sounds, and I'm just using sounds from a sample pack right here. So this is just showing you the capabilities of quickly using only sounds from this pack, getting something that sounds pretty decent right off the bat. And yeah, let's give it a final listen through, and then I'll leave you guys on your way. All right, dope. That is a track in an hour. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button below. We got tons of amazing tutorials and content. And if you want even more, I highly recommend going to kick-bass.com. The link is in the description below, and signing up to join our community. It doesn't matter if you just started learning how to produce or you've been producing for a while. We give you guys all the tools from track feedback to tutorials to an amazing community to really grow and develop as a producer. So highly recommend checking that out, and hope you guys enjoyed the video. Remember, grab Electro Tech. We just released it, and I'm out. Peace.